Welcome back for the last event of October 18th, 2021, Words and Music. We have had an incredible day. I wanted to end tonight telling you a little bit about the history of Words and Music. Words and Music was founded in 1997 by the Pirate Sally Faulkner Society under the direction of the incomparable Rosemary James and Mr. Joe DeSalvo. Incredible people. They ran it for 20 years. And then in 2017, they approached us here at One Book, One New Orleans and asked if we might like to inherit this beautiful festival that they created. And we humbly and gratefully said yes. And we're doing the best we can to live out that legacy that they created every year for the festival. And one of the people that I met at Words and Music when it was under Rosemary and Joe's directorship was Tad Bartlett. Tad is a lawyer by day. He's a writer by night and a member of the Peauxdunque Writers Alliance. And I knew that Tad really loved this festival. So when we put together our initial festival steering committee, we asked Tad to be on it, and he graciously accepted. And one of the things that Tad has really worked to establish with us is not only the Words and Music writing competition, but also the annual launch at Words and Music of the newest issues of the Peauxdunque Review. This is the third year we are continuing this tradition. The first year was in person at Espiritu. I hope the next year will be in person as well, but these last 2 years have been online. And Tad Bartlett will be emceeing tonight's launch party for issues 5 and 6 of the Peauxdunque Review, which is visually stunning. The cover has this big red bird on it. Everyone should go get a copy. And without further ado, take it away, Tad.
Thanks so much, Megan. It's great to be here in Peauxdunque. We're just thrilled to be partnered with Words and Music, and it's a fantastic conference and really a fantastic year-long project and commitment that Words and Music and One Book, One New Orleans put on, and we're so excited to be part of it. Peauxdunque, just a real quick word about who we are. Peauxdunque Writers Alliance has been around for 14 years now. 4 years ago, we decided to start to put together one of the most old-fashioned of things, a print journal. Not only that, but hardcover, all the most like crazy, irrational decisions you can think that could be made in producing a journal in this day and age were sort of our guiding principles. And it's been wonderful. Every year, with every issue, the submissions we get are just incredible, and they reach into us and speak to us, and hopefully I know they speak to other writers and to the readers of the journal. And it's wonderful to have this partnership with Words and Music so that we can introduce the year's issues to folks. So this year we've produced issue 5, and issue 6 will be coming out in December. So we're going to have readers from both issues 5 and 6. Issue 5 actually has just gotten into the hands of our contributors, I think, within the last week. I hope some of the contributors here tonight can show it to you, because I don't have my copy yet. From Larry, our editor-in-chief, who operates out of Dallas. We're kind of spread across 7 states. It's a great experience, and these are great people to work with. What I'd like to do to start off, Larry couldn't be with us, our editor-in-chief. A lot of thanks goes to him for all the work he puts into the journal. I'm merely the managing editor. I rely heavily on an incredible staff: Emily Schote, our fiction editor, Chris Romagera and Norda Adams, who have been our poetry editors this year, April Blevins-Pejic, who is our CNF, our creative nonfiction editor, and then we've got a staff of close to 25 readers who are themselves incredible writers and bring a lot to this. But I would like to read Larry's editor's letter at the beginning of issue 5. So to do this, you have to imagine that I am a shave-headed ex-Marine and a particularly sensitive writer at the same time. So imagine that. And here I am being Larry. I sit in near silence, as I have for the last hour, transfixed by the artwork of Ramon Carrasco. As the sunlight fades from my home office, so does the dance of light on canvas until there's nothing but warm embers and shadow. Our phoenix has retired for the evening, ready to catch fire again at first light. If you're reading this, you likely know I'm speaking of the stunning mythological creature that adorns the cover of issue 5 of Peauxdunque Review, our fiery phoenix. When the Peauxdunque Collective commissioned the painting last winter, we knew it cliche, a little too on the nose, but we simply couldn't resist that audacity of hope. I still can't, not really. A life devoid of hope is, well, its own death, and there's been enough reaping already. I'd rather return to our phoenix if you'd indulge me, and the hope promised in the pages within. The symbol of the phoenix is rather ubiquitous and quite simplistic: fire, ash, rebirth. This is definitely the metaphor we had in mind last winter. Too many months later, we've witnessed a plethora of fire, mountains of ash, but still await Renaissance's delivery. Damn it, our campy metaphor had failed us. As the world burned, too often quite literally, I spent hours staring at the glimmering canvas or scrolling my news feed searching for answers. It wasn't until recently, when I revisited the many texts and emails I exchanged with the artist regarding our vision for the painting, that some meaning emerged. Ramon creates his images by applying layer upon layer of paint, sometimes 20 or more, to the canvas. It's a fascinating amalgamation. How I witness his technique, since we live several hours away from one another, is by viewing the in-process images he sends via texted pictures or series emails. When he does this and sends me the current state of his creation, he will wait on my response before proceeding. Most of the time, I am blown away, and my responses are usually something along the lines of, "Wow, incredible work. Is it finished?" Because to my eye, I can't imagine it being any better. To which he often responds, "No, it's probably 65% complete. It's still speaking to me, man." And on we go. Toward the end of the process for the phoenix, I noticed that Ramon had these small black lines of paint running from the bird's body. He does this with all his work, but these seemed a bit more pronounced. When I asked him about them, he said simply, "Surviving ravens is messy business." At the time, I laughed it off, assuming I knew what he meant. Upon further scrutiny, and out of a profound sense of responsibility to save our metaphor, I revisited those words with him, where he explained his understanding of the phoenix was one more of survival than actual rebirth, that it outlived the ravens. After a little digging, I found that one of the first mentions of the phoenix was in a Greek didactic poem attributed to Hesiod called The Precepts of Chiron. I won't bore you with a lot of ancient Greek poetry translation, like I could pull off any of that haughty declaration. But what I found, basically, was that the phoenix was known to survive, that is, outlive, 9 ravens. Since our mid-2020 issue cover, conceived in the midst of social, moral, and physical upheaval, was the raven, you can maybe see how I might jump at this self-fulfilling definition. I had my new metaphor for issue 5 and my new mantra: stop awaiting resurrection. Just survive the ravens. Armed with my new and admittedly convenient outlook, I approached this letter and what our diligent Peauxdunque Review editorial staff and I had whipped up for issue 5. With so many setbacks, restarts, losses, and disappointments, I was counting on the words, your words, to save the day, and you did not disappoint. After a delicious warm-up with our staff pieces by Peauxdunque folks Emily Schote and Jed Marston, I reacquainted myself with the body of issue 5. As luck would have it, the first story that seared my soul, Dead Girl Summer by Christie Lauder, was also the one chosen by Tad Bartlett to lead us into the issue. I saw why right away, as this enthralling story so beautifully captures what we are all dealing with. The pregnant pause we're crushed beneath, the waiting as death lurks, then the explosiveness of our will as we thrust forward and remove our wool to show the wolf fur underneath, too tired and angry to let fear rule us anymore. This theme, the anger at what death takes as others live, desperate for hope, carries on in Helen Marie Casey's Your Tree, with its apt depictions of aloneness inside loneliness, and in Nathan Moore's Comorbidity, as we too have had to learn to die doubly, oh so ready to rebuild something shaped into the semblance of living. But what of hope? Surviving death is not nothing. But it isn't necessarily life, not the swooning, wondrous life to which we most aspire. We start to get an answer, I believe, in The Transition Mandarin Peel by L.L. Walker, where we are reminded that, indeed, you can't force anything, because in time, everything will push its way out. That simple wisdom is the start, the crack we all need in the bleak veneer. And then, as we convulse and remember our laughter, we have the awe-inspiring nonfiction meta-work, Look, by Constance Adler, where a younger Constance so beautifully captures where we are with, I raised my hand and said, absent, then goes on to take us back into ourselves and slays us with the best advice of all. Assume we know nothing. Write it all down. So that's what we'll do. We'll keep looking, keep fighting, keep hoping. And we will, for however long it takes, survive the ravens long enough to rise up and write it all down. Please, dear Phoenix, light our path. Then he goes on to thank all of our contributors, which I thank them, and I'm ready to let y'all hear from our contributors. And first, we will hear from the lead story, the lead piece from issue 5, from Christie Lauder, and with her story, Dead Girl Summer. So, Christie, I'm ready for you to take it away.
Thank you. Luckily, I actually do have my copy of issue 5 here, so everyone can see what it looks like. I'm going to read, unfortunately for us prose writers, we tend to be long-winded, and therefore maybe you can't do an entire piece in a reading when we only have a little time, so you're going to get a bit of the story called Dead Girl Summer. They found the dead girl in May. It was all we whispered about, speculated about, grabbing each other in hallways between classes with fingers crossed and texts sent out. Did you hear? Did you know? Hey, check in. I haven't heard from you and I'm worried. Where did they find her? What's her name? We checked everyone we knew, made sure the girls we liked were okay, and even the girls we didn't like. And while we looked, we spread gossip. Every shred of evidence and rumor that we gleaned from the news, from listening in on our parents, or snippets from teachers speaking to each other. The missing redhead with a port wine stain on her cheek turned out to just have a cold and was at home. Catherine Ann, the most popular girl in St. Agatha's sophomore class, had gone to visit a sick relative for a year, just before the body was found. There were a few hours when everyone was sure it was her. But then one of the other sophomores got a call through the relative and then to Catherine Ann, and she was fine. Everything was fine. Don't tell anyone about the baby. Let me know who it is. We had all heard about the phone call. We all already knew about the baby. At the end of the week, the school finally addressed the news. In chapel Friday, with plumes of incense still choking in the air, after the prayers and the homilies and the club announcements, the Monsignor cleared his throat. Brothers and sisters, as you have certainly heard by now, an unfathomable event has occurred in our beloved town. Detective Vasquez has asked for a few minutes to address the student body. Please give her your undivided attention. We had already spotted Detective Vasquez. Strangers don't often attend Friday morning chapel, much less ones dressed in jeans and a loose blazer they belatedly buttoned down to hide their gun holster. We watched her during prayers. She had also bowed her head, seemed to pray. We couldn't see her face from where we were. Detective Vasquez took the microphone. She was pretty and young, younger than we would have imagined. We watched a lot of TV, and those detectives are always older, world-weary, solving crimes in 42 minutes with commercial breaks. Vasquez accepted the microphone from Monsignor and waited for him to step away before speaking. Thank you. I am so sorry to disturb your week, but as I'm sure you're aware from the news, last week the police located the body of a young woman in the woods behind Eddowes Park. Unfortunately, we've not been able to identify her yet. The police department is hoping you'll have some information that could help our investigation. She had a pretty voice, feminine melodic, when she vaguely described the unidentified girl. Some facts to build around. The girl had been, a brunette, late teens, 20s, with a butterfly tattoo on one shoulder and "Just Breathe" written on a forearm. Someone had seen her at the mall once, and if anybody knew a body, a young woman, who matched that description, to please contact the police department. Maybe someone had also seen her at the mall, or she was someone's visiting cousin. Maybe we'd seen her at the 7-Eleven, where kids hung out in the parking lot drinking Slurpees and coughing up cigarette smoke. Detective Vasquez paused speaking to sweep her gaze with the pews where we sat obediently in our plaid skirts or khaki pants and our Friday polo shirts with the school's name embroidered on the breast. We imagined she was looking for the clue one of us was hiding, the sudden outburst that would solve the mystery. That's what would have happened if we were on a TV show. A hand shot up into the air. Before the detective acknowledged him, Seth Byers and Lanky Jr. stood up. How was she killed? He folded his arms across his chest, chin jutted forward like she owed him the answer. I'm not at liberty to discuss that, Vasquez managed to say before another voice called out. Was she naked? An entire pew of junior boys burst out laughing. Izzy shot out of her seat. Sister Ann got to her before whatever curse Izzy was building up in her chest broke free and forced her back down into the pew. A woman is dead. A woman not much older than you. Detective Vasquez had identified the shouter, staring at the center of that row until their laughter choked out. You should show some respect. Beige was still standing. No one had made him sit down. Chapel ended after that. Detective Vasquez handed out some of her business cards as we neatly filed out of the church and back to the school. Izzy shoved a card on her bra strap while she scanned the boys' faces. I'm going to shove him down a flight of stairs, Izzy hissed under her breath. Not that she knew which he it was yet. Andrew, who usually sat with us at lunch, ignored her and stated confidently, I bet she was a prostitute. What the fuck? Carolyn snapped. How do you know that? We all just sat in the same meeting. Because they always find prostitutes dead in the woods. No one knows who she is? Probably a hooker. Andrew turned right towards the math wing before we could respond. We watched him join another cluster of guys, all in the strolling casually to class, talk about whatever, prostitutes or math or who was going to get an older brother to buy beer for the party that weekend, their gates loose and easy. We bunched up as we headed to the library for free period. They found the next body during graduation. Or rather, they found it the morning of graduation, and we all heard about it during the ceremony, passed from whisper to whisper while the seniors were accepting their diplomas. We knew who it was this time. One of the freshman girls, a little blonde slip of a thing, who had always had some story about the bruises she showed up to school with, just plausible enough the adults could justify not asking any more questions. They had arrested her father that morning. That was the fact we knew. The why was another thing. Maybe she had died because she'd spilled coffee on him. Maybe she stayed out too late or didn't answer him fast enough. Maybe she just existed, and that was enough to bother him. Our phones shook with vibrations, hidden in our laps where our parents didn't see them. Cassidy, someone whispered. Her name was Cassidy. We floated in the community pool in candy-colored tubes, wearing candy-colored bikinis, working on our early summer tans. We smelled like coconut oil and chlorine. Alice trailed her fingers in the blue water, threw her arm over her eyes to shield them from the late afternoon sun. Carlin had her fingers ringed around Alice's ankles. They didn't float too far from each other and bump into other swimmers. Izzy rotated in her own orbit. The energetic screams of little kids and the fussy calls of their mothers kept cutting across the music the lifeguards played to get us to notice them. Jake Ryan DM'd me 3 times this week. Alice rolled her arm up to get a look at Carolyn's face, but she had turned it away and studied indifference. What does he want? Nothing. I don't know. We talked about what we were doing this summer at the fair, maybe a movie or something. Jake Ryan and a couple of the public high school boys were here too, showboating dives off the high board. We looked at him waiting at the bottom of the ladder, water beating on his pale, new-to-summer chest. When he raised a hand to wave at us, we sank back into our tubes and pretended we didn't see. Jake Ryan told math class he wouldn't go out with you if the other choice was death, and you didn't come to school for 3 days after. That was in middle school, Izzy. Everyone was stupid then. Izzy snorted. We're going to the fair. We always go to the fair together. I'll just go to a different night too. I don't know. I haven't said yes. Well, you shouldn't. We all fell quiet again. Carolyn let go of Alice and kicked a slow foot in the water to make her tube spin. Izzy reached out and tugged Caroline's curls as she drifted by. Boys had come and gone. We had remained. On our towels laid out by the side of the pool, one of our phones dinged. In quick succession, the other two, and then a flurry of metallic bells sounded from all around the park. Ping, ping, ping. The mothers stopped scolding their children to check their messages. The temperature changed. All those eyes checked their screens, spread fog-like across the pool. We couldn't make out the murmurs, but when the boys left the ladder, we slipped into the water and swam to the edge. Alice got to her phone first. Jesus Christ, they found another body. And that was how it started. 1 or 2 dead girls are a passing interest. 3 are a curse. Now everyone has theories. It was the heat. It was the sunspot. There was a secret pedophile ring run by Satanists who were bumping off girls who could identify them. Hillary Clinton did it. It was fluoride in the water, or the lack of fluoride, or maybe just some shit bad luck. Everyone wants to talk about the theories. No one ever bothered to talk about the girls' bodies into a stopping place in a more interesting discussion about whether or not the mayor was a lizard person. Sometimes they had names. Sometimes they're just the body. Sometimes they're just a smaller number in the context of a bigger number. The first found, the one killed by her dad, the one who should have fought harder, the one who remains nameless. She was another dump body at first, found in an overgrown lot near the cheap brick apartments you move to when you're just starting out in life. The word serial killer started to make its way down the telephone lines, but in the end, her case was solved quickly. Magdalene, who was pregnant and happy about it, even though she was young and broke, had a married boyfriend who wasn't as happy about the coming baby as she was. Cop shows taught us that pregnant women were often at risk, but not how to stop being at risk. Magdalene fought, Detective Vasquez said in the news. She fought really hard. We were sprawled across the furniture, box fangs Box fans angled in on us, sweating and watching TV. We'd been cooped up for days, shut in between each other's homes, as our parents grew paranoid, but not paranoid enough to take time off work. Safety in numbers. Carlin scrolled absently through the channels until she landed on reruns of The Real Housewives and tossed the remote back onto the coffee table. Are you fucking kidding me? Izzy had the good chair and was furthest from the remote, which she complained about but didn't move to fix. It's New Jersey. She's going to freak out and flip the table. Classic. You've literally seen this a million times. Put something else on. Put the news on. Carolyn's face paled under her fading tan. No more news. I'm tired of the news. I am tired of watching this crap. A pressure headache crept into the space behind Alice's eyes. Caroline reached over and pressed the up volume. Izzy scrambled to her feet, grabbed the clicker, flipped to CNN, and flipped us all off in what seemed like one movement. Click. A dark-haired woman was pounding her fists into a tabletop, screaming at her castmates. Isabel snatched the remote out of Caroline's hand again and launched it against the wall, where it shattered into dozens of cheap plastic bits. Carolyn was on her feet then, too, screeching about what a monumental bitch she was, and Izzy screamed back until it all turned into indistinguishable curse words where Alice pressed her palms to her eyes, and the we of us had swelled like a balloon about to pop. Let's go see the Rose. Alice stood up. Get me some fucking aspirin, and let's go see the Rose. We knew about the Rose from our aunts, or maybe our older sisters, the slightly older neighbor girl who had heard from their aunts and sisters and neighbors, a chain of stories passed carefully down the female information tributaries. Carolyn had heard about it from her cousin, and she told Izzy, who told Alice, who had just come to St. Agatha's after her family moved up from Florida. These were hardly the first dead girls. In the 40s, a couple of homeless men looking for a place to set up camp found the dismembered body of a young woman. She'd been split in two, arranged over a flat rock, with roses placed over her eyes and stuffed in her mouth, and depending on who you heard the story from, stuffed between her legs. She was smiling because whatever had killed her had used a knife to make sure she'd smile. It was a couple of months after the Black Dahlia murder in Los Angeles, and the cops assumed this is a copycat killing, or maybe that mutilator from Cleveland had passed through town, or Satanists, because like the Black Dahlia, they never found out who killed her. At least the Delilah had her name, Elizabeth Short. Our town's Delilah was never claimed. Some newspaper asshole called her the Rose to cash in on the connection. We claimed it, took it from them, and passed along what we knew about her story. She was buried in St. Agatha's graveyard. You could go see her grave if you wanted. Maybe some people did, but we went to the park. Over the decades, it was a thing you did if you were a girl of a certain age. Once you heard the story, inevitably you figured out which bus line took you out to the hiking trails at Edo's, and you and your girlfriends made the pilgrimage out to the rock. You left her something like your favorite hair tie or fruit you saved from your lunch. If you were enterprising, you flinched photos from your parents' sideboard and picked some wildflowers and made a proper altar for her. But mostly you went to look where they found that sad, nameless girl, and you kept her ghost company, even for a few minutes, so she knew she wasn't forgotten. Sometimes you went once, and that was enough. Sometimes you went back again and again until you got older, and the urge you used to feel to visit her became a distant or an emotion until time to tell someone else the story. You did not bring the boys with you. This is not for them. As we got off the bus near the trail entrance, the driver paused, passing a worried eye over our tank tops and shorts and beat-up kicks. Are you sure you girls want to get off here? Are you meeting someone? He was kind, sincere. That didn't change the curdle in our stomachs. We waited for the bus to pull away before hiking down the trail. There's a place where you need to turn off the trail to find the rock. Depending on the tides of visitors, the secret path can be difficult to spot. Once we tied a ribbon to a branch right off the trail to find our way the next time we came back. Someone had ripped it down when we returned. The path dumped up onto a dinky clearing that was only slightly bigger than the flat rock, big enough for 2 men to make a camp, or for a woman to be slaughtered, or some teenage girls to set up a makeshift memorial and no more. We shouldn't have been surprised, but we were. How could we have been the only ones to think of her? The rock had been turned into a proper shrine, with bouquets of flowers laying across it, dried out by the summer sun, half-melted candles soft to the poke of a finger, food that hadn't been stolen by animals, and notes. So many notes, tight squares of notebook paper, photos blown away to get caught in the high grass. Someone had marked 5 crosses in the rock and left her chalk behind in a little brass bowl. 3 we could name. The other 2 were goose flesh creeping up our arms. Hey, look at this. Izzy had Cassie's yearbook picture pinched between her fingers. We turned it over. My beloved daughter had been scrawled on the back. Izzy pressed her lips into a thin line and tried to smooth the wrinkles out of the photo with her palm. We settled cross-legged on the rock, careful not to disturb anything else, and Alice passed out the sandwiches we packed. I don't want this, Carolyn said, but took it anyway because that was the tradition. Half for us, half for her. We ate in subdued silence. When we were finished, we laid out our offerings, half sandwiches, an orange, an apple, a piece of chocolate had already softened. Izzy and Alice poked through the grass for the blown-away notes. Carlin furiously scrawled her own note in the rock with one of the pieces of chalk. When the notes had been gathered and tucked back into the shrine ready to go, Carlin's eyes were wet and bright. At the edge of the clearing, Izzy yelled, "Wait!" and sprang it back. She made a show of plucking up a yearbook photo and setting it at the center, laying wildflowers in front of it. But we noticed her eyes moving quickly over the area where Carlin had been praying. "Fuck you," Carlin hissed before crashing off the path to the trail. Alice hung back, asked Izzy in a hushed voice what Carlin had written. It just said, "Help us," over and over. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Christie. I don't know, Christie, if we've discussed this or not, but when your story came into Peauxdunque, into our submission queue, it was not my first time seeing that story. I was really honored last spring to be asked by the folks at the LSU MFA program to judge the MFA students fiction competition, and really a lot of lovely stories, but there was one that rose to the top, and it was Dead Girl Summer, and I was just blown away by the totally earned and genuine and not at all obtrusive use of this first person plural point of view that was no gimmick. I mean, it was a beautiful thing, and it was like the only logical point of view for this story, and used so well. And so when I saw it come into our submission queue, part of me really wanted to just like say to everybody, all right, we're taking this one. But it's like, no, I'm just going to sit here and quietly root for it and let it go through our preliminary readers, let it go to Emily, our fiction editor, and see what they think. And they all came away just as blown away as I was the first time I saw it. So just a wonderful story. And we're so proud to lead issue 5 with it. So our second reader tonight is David Meischen. David, I've known actually for a long time now. David, it's been 10 years. I knew him. We're publishing him as a poet. I knew him first as a fiction writer. We were in a fiction workshop together one summer in Arkansas. And then really just sort of kept up in the way you keep up with people online. And as we started Peauxdunque Review, David's poems came into us, and they're just so powerful and lyrical, and like his stories. And again, it was the kind of thing where I know this person and I know his writing, but I'm not, as the managing editor, going to dictate what happens to it. Let's just let it go through the process and see. And again, it was one of those where everybody agreed that these were clearly poems that belonged in Peauxdunque Review. And I think you're going to be reading some things that are going to be in issue 6, I believe. And but also we published David's poems as well as some of his short fiction in some earlier issues of Peauxdunque Review, which I think he's going to share. So David, welcome, and thank you for being with us tonight.
Thanks very much. I have really enjoyed these issues, and it has been such a pleasure to see my work in Peauxdunque Review. I'm going to start by saying that I'm going to I was going to do something on share screen, but I haven't figured it out, so forget about that. I'll say that I have been staring at photographs my entire life, and the older I get, and the farther back in the past these photographs become, the more fascinated I am. So I'm going to start with a poem written to a photograph of my sister taken in 1949, when I would have been right at a year old and she was 2.5. These poems, I'm going to read 2 of them from issue 6. They're part of a series that I'm calling County Road Poems, in that they're all set along the county road leading to the family farm in South Texas, where I grew up. And this one, again from issue 6, is called Vanishing Point, 1949. At the left, a barn wall, unpainted. A ladder leans 45 degrees against the wall. Behind the ladder, forming an L with the barn, weathered boards of the milking shed, a feed room door. Judy is 6 months past her second birthday and 3 steps up the ladder, all dressed up for company. Crisp white blouse, pressed plaid jumper, freshly braided hair. No coat on this December day. Raised up on hind legs, 2 dogs, their white socked forepaws, are reaching where she climbs, snouts pointing, alert. I see their muted whimpers. The photograph, its stillness, the years have silenced the moment. One cat perches, silvered gray in faded black and white, spine arched along the rung Judy has reached with her hands. The other cat is 2 rungs farther up, mid-step, coming down. White vest, white forepaws. My sister has turned toward whoever holds the camera, but not her eyes. Her eyes look out past the right edge of the frame. There were pomegranate shrubs in that direction, a row of them, pig pens, a thicket of trees and scrub, a few cows, their meandering trails. Gone now. But Judy is here, her eyes drawn to something I will never see. That is one of the County Road poems in issue 6. And give me a second here. I'm going to pull up the other one. I grew up on a working farm picking cotton, and in August of 1962, heard some news while picking cotton that felt so crazily out of place that I wrote this poem many years later. It's called Cotton Harvest, 1962, also in issue 6. Midday apparition, a figure pale as sunlight, her skirt billowing above sun-blazed green. You are soaked in your own liquid, your flesh like candle wax, salt stiffening in your shirt. At row's end, your sack is weighed, and water never tasted so good. The crew head records the pounds you picked. Your sack is lifted up, your cotton spilled onto the truck. Snatches of song from the radio in the cab, a gaggle of cousins around the open door. Sacks empty, they trade fancies about a couple on the dance floor last night. The male 6'4", his sweetie 5'1". I bet she has to stand on a chair when they do it. The cousins chuckle and nudge. They turn to you, winking. You turn away, step into mesquite shade, open your lunch sack. Salami and crackers, an apple, more water. You drowse. Barbiturate overdose. Someone at the dashboard is turning the volume up. Marilyn Monroe found dead. A burst of static. Chloral hydrate, the newsman says. Pentobarbital. You stumble up, falter into trees along the creek. Thick live oak canopy where you unzip to piss. A spasm yanking at your rib cage. Agarita bristles nearby, sharp tips glinting in a thin beam of sun. A breeze like a whisper, her voice singing. I prefer a man who lives and gives expensive jewels. Her diamonds dazzle against hot pink satin. That's the second one that's going to be in issue 6. I'm going to read one poem from issue 2. Not exactly set along the county road, but of that period of time. This is a prose poem in 3 parts, and it's called Skipping Rope 1958. January, Sputnik in the news again. Muted sunlight falls through bare mesquite. No leaves, no drooping shadows, stitched of lace. In the open space nearby, 2 girls, their rope a buzzing blur. The Russian satellite has fallen. 93 days in orbit, 1,440 arcs across the sky above you. Looping, looping into the whirl, the other girls in pairs, chanting punctured by shouts from the field beyond. Blunt pop as the bat connects. Whoops upon the air, the boys exulting, like gulls, like crows. A straggle of them coming at you when the teacher rings an end. Their calls burn the air you've taken in, but your rope keeps humming. You are inside the shimmer of the hum. You are safe here, pads of your feet bouncing sheathed in loafers 12 days old. Your pennies gleam there, heads up for luck. March, Life magazine reports a disaster. Gray blusters at the classroom windows, no sky today. Warm enough for short sleeves, though fixing on the open page, you hug yourself. No news photographer on hand when a bus went off the road into this icy river. Rear door open in the artist's depiction, some children still inside, others in the water, the bus nose down. 27 drowning. When your teacher says it's time to go outside, your jump rope safe beneath your desktop. But the boys know that's what you want out there. A single word at their lips like a hammer. Girl, 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 girl. There is no stopping them. Here, stay here, inside alone again. Your teacher knows. She is stern, though sometimes kind, as now. Walking out with the others, letting you stay, your magazine open. Light shifts at the windows, a brighter gray of almost sun. Voices at play, the river swirling. April, Elvis gets a haircut. His music is everywhere. Your mother clicking her fingers, singing along. I don't want no other love. Baby, it's just you I'm thinking of. She's taught you the bop. Something to do with your feet when you can't be still. Toes tapping beneath your desk this morning. Windows open to sunlight. So clean and pure, your chest aches breathing. They drafted him. He's Private Presley now. Never get rich, dig in a ditch. You can jump rope to that. Out the door and all but running down the hallway when it's time. Ahead of the girls, but they will come with you this morning. You're teaching them the step you practice with your mother. Any Elvis song they choose. You have the girls. You have the bop. You have the hip swivel hillbilly with all his hair cut off. Your loafers jitter beneath you as if they know the dance. Thank you. I'm going to stop there and let some of the fiction readers have a little more of the time. It is, again, such a pleasure to be among you and to be reading with Peauxdunque readers and reading for the Peauxdunque editors. Thanks, Tad.
Thank you, David. That was lovely. That was really, really lovely. So I talked about how the first 2 readers I had some exposure to their work before it came across into Peauxdunque. And well, that's always a great thing to have happen. Most of the stuff in our book, in our issues, they come across, and all I know about that writer is that piece that's in front of us, and that is such a lovely feeling, especially when, I mean, you'll have some days where you're sitting there and you've got 1,000 things happening in a million different directions, and you're going through submissions, and you know, just they're not hitting, you know, whatever that spot is that you want them to hit. And there is this one CNF piece that came through earlier this year that the preliminary readers are like, oh, this is just such a beautiful, calming piece. And I was having one of those days where I was reading things. I'm like, yep. Oh, that's it. That's the place where I can stop reading, or, oh, no, that's just not doing it for me. And this piece, when I came across it, I could not stop reading it. Even when I was in just that foul mood. And by the time I was done reading it, that foul mood was gone. And that was my introduction to this writer, Janine DeBaise. And this is her creative nonfiction piece that we're going to be publishing in issue 6, Dust You Are. Janine is the author of 2 collections of poetry, Body Language and Of a Feather, published by independent presses. Her essays have appeared in Orion Magazine, the Southwest Review, the Hopper, and numerous other journals, which I'm very happy to say is going to include ours very shortly. She teaches writing and literature at SUNY Environmental Science and Forestry, and she is here to read to us from her piece tonight. Janine?
Hey, and I am reading from outside of Syracuse, New York, where we're expecting snow. So, and this essay is called Dust You Are. I didn't expect to see a dead monk. I went to the Trappist monastery for a silent retreat, leaving behind my noisy household of teenage children, bringing with me an unfinished manuscript, flying from snowy upstate New York into the lovely warm springtime of Georgia. From the Atlantic airport, I took a cab through farmland in small towns and then down a long driveway lined with magnolia trees. We stopped next to a cinder block building tucked below a towering stone church. That's it, the cab driver said, yanking my suitcase from the trunk. Inside the retreat house, a woman with a southern accent gave me a room key. I'm from New York, I said to her. God love you, she said. My room held a bed and a desk. Peering through the window, I looked down to see a little graveyard with neat rows of stone crosses. Beyond the low cemetery wall, pine trees sighed in the wind. I hung my red fleece on a hook, shoved my suitcase under the bed, and set my toothbrush on a shelf in the bathroom. Then I stepped out into the hallway. About 10 feet away from my room, a white paper sign taped to our door said, Church. I opened the door, and suddenly I was inside a huge stone church with Gothic arches, a high ceiling, and stained glass windows that turned the sunlight blue and violet. My sneakers squeaked on the shiny stone floor as I walked through the empty church and out the door. Warm air brushed against my bare arms. I followed a winding path to a pond edged with the knobby knees of bald cypress trees. Rust-colored needles were scattered across the rich red dirt. I don't usually think of dirt as pretty, but after months of white and gray winter at home, the color of the earth was spectacular. I'd read everything on the monastery website. I knew that the monks prayed 7 times each day, beginning with vigils at 4 a.m. and ending with Carlin at 7:30 p.m. They lived their lives according to the rule of St. Benedict, written in the 14th century. These monks made stained glass. They ran a bookstore where they sold religious items, a bakery where they made fruitcake, and a nursery that specialized in bonsai trees. The website had led me to imagine the monastery as a busy place, filled with monks bustling about, sort of like a southern version of the elves at the North Pole. Instead, the grounds were empty. Magnolia leaves crunched under my feet. From the pond came the faint honking of geese. When I heard the hum of car tires against the pavement, I looked up to see the God Loves You woman driving away. As I wandered back through the retreat house, I noticed that the other rooms were empty, their doors ajar. I was the only guest. I sat down at the little desk in my room and pulled out my manuscript, but the silence intruded. When I heard the church bells ring, I jumped up eagerly. I hadn't intended to go to the church services. This was a writing retreat. But already I was eager to see other humans. Opening the door that said church, I looked across the sanctuary to a similar door on the other side. That door opened, and there were the monks. They walked in a straggling line, old men dressed alike in cream-colored robes that caught the blue and purple light streaming through the stained glass windows. They paid no attention to me or even to each other, but climbed into the wooden choir stalls. One monk leaned forward to open his psalm book, but most of them just sat back, waiting. I tiptoed over to sit in a wooden stall near the back. The monks on the right began to chant, and the monks on the left responded. These tired old men made a lovely sound, which echoed from the tall, arched ceiling. They had been doing this for decades, for my entire life. That evening, when I went to the dining room, I found a note. Your meal is in the refrigerator. I ate at a table closest to the door, hoping another person would join me. No one did. Back in my room, I pressed my face against the window. I could see the church looming over me, its arched windows reflecting the last light of day, and the little graveyard below. I turned on the lamp, locked the door, and settled onto the bed with my journal. Coyotes howled in the distance. I felt like I had strayed into a Gothic novel, or perhaps a spooky episode of The Simpsons. I missed my husband and teenagers. In this blank little room, I had too much time to think. The silence of the monastery was a presence, a big hovering creature that pressed against the edges of my brain. As the window panes turned dark blue and then black, my anxiety rose. I worried about little things. Would my husband remember to take our youngest son to his piano lesson? I worried about big things like climate change and species going extinct and toxins in the water supply. I thought about my parents. They had begun to encounter the inevitable health problems that come with old age. A close friend had lost her mother that winter, and with that came the realization that we too were mortal. I began to think that a silent retreat was a terrible idea. I'd come to get writing done, not wrestle with personal demons. I tossed my journal on the floor, turned off the light, and lay in the narrow bed, wide awake. 8 more days to go, I thought to myself. And I'm going to skip some of the middle, so I know you want to get to the dead monk. So in the middle part, I describe 5 days of the silent retreat, me wrestling with demons. A whole group of retreatants come, and then they leave. And it's a silent retreat, so they never say a word to me. That next morning, I slept past breakfast. And when I went to the dining room for lunch, the kitchen door was closed. I didn't smell any food or see a note. They'd forgotten about me, I figured. No matter. I could survive on the granola bars and fruit I had in my room. I was pretty sure that another group of retreatants was due soon because I'd heard a flurry of movements from the first floor. Several people talking in low voices, footsteps moving rapidly back and forth, a phone ringing from the direction of the office. As I went out through the church, I saw what looked like a simple wooden casket, shallow and open, with handles on the sides and some folded white cloths on the bottom, resting near the big cross in the back of the church. A Lenten decoration, I thought to myself. An hour later, I came through the church, walking at my usual brisk pace, through the purple light shimmering across the stone floor. I had almost reached the sanctuary before I realized that I wasn't alone. A group of elderly monks sat in folding chairs in a semicircle around the wooden casket, which had been moved up close to the altar. They weren't talking or reading. They were just sitting there. 2 had their eyes closed. Inside the casket lay an old man, dressed in monastic robes, the toes of his sturdy black shoes sticking straight up. He was dead. My sneakers squealed against the stone floor. None of the monks looked up. I took my sneakers off and tiptoed in my socks until I got to the door of the retreat house. Once I was safely inside my room, I took a deep breath. A pine-scented breeze came through the window. In the little graveyard outside, 2 monks dressed in work clothes were digging a grave. It was a little unsettling. I went down to the kitchen to get a cup of tea. The God loves you woman was mopping the floor. She looked up when I walked in. You're still here? She asked in surprise, looking out at the parking lot. I came by airplane, I said, so I don't have a car here. My flight home isn't until Monday. After 6 days of silence, it felt odd to talk out loud. Did you get lunch? She asked. I shook my head. Wait here, she said. She brought me a bowl of steaming pasta with a couple slices of Italian bread. I sat down and ate gratefully. We need to feed you supper, she said. She looked into the kitchen as if thinking something over, and then back at me. Come to the funeral, she said. It's closed to the public, but you're staying here, so you're part of the community. It's at 4:30. We'll have supper afterwards. When I walked into the church that afternoon, monks were gathering on the altar, all dressed in cream-colored robes with purple stoles. In the pews were a handful of women in dark dresses, the God loves you woman, and me. Once the service began, an old monk got up and gave a little talk about Brother Clarence. He was 86 years old and had been a Cistercian for 50 years. The monk said, Brother Clarence had the gift of taking something simple and making it complex. The other monks laughed. The monks chanted and sang. They sprinkled the body with holy water and sent big puffs of incense into the air. I went up for communion, taking my spot in the line of shuffling old men. The monk ahead of me paused for a moment at the casket, reached over, and patted Brother Clarence's hands. That was it, just that gesture. At the end of the service, 6 monks lifted the casket using the wooden handles on the side and carried it through a side door. They sang as they walked. We all followed, and I found myself in the little graveyard outside my bedroom window. The monks set the casket next to the open grave. 2 monks folded the white cloth over Brother Clarence's face and wrapped the white cloth around his body. Using long strips of cloth that looked like belts to a bathrobe, they lifted the body out of the casket and lowered him into the ground. Then each monk took a turn shoveling red dirt into the grave. I couldn't help remember the times I've buried a cat or a dog. This is how it ends, I thought to myself. Work and play, marriage and childbirth, years of taking care of children and teenagers and elderly parents, writing and reading in classes, and in the end, my body will return to the earth. The monk's schedule of prayer and work continued uninterrupted. When I went to Carlin that night, they shuffled in as usual, climbing up into the wooden stalls, opening their psalm books. I listened while they chanted, their voices rising to the high ceiling. Afterwards, just before going to bed, I pressed my face against my window to look at the fresh grave, the outline just visible in the moonlight. Soon, Brother Clarence's body would turn to dust, to mingle forever with that rich red soil. I woke when the church bells rang for vigils at 4 a.m. I didn't get dressed and go to prayer, but stayed in bed, listening to the wind push its way through cracks in the inefficient windows. Despite the haunting darkness, my thoughts were calm and comforting. Perhaps it was all those monks just on the other side of the stone wall, praying.
Thank you so much, Janine. I'm really excited to have that in issue 6. And just as you were reading it, I'm reminded again why that was such an affecting piece for us as we were going through submissions. Our next reader is a poet who's going to be in issue 6, Willie James. Willie hails from Chicago and is the poetry editor at Pacific Literary Review, as well as the co-host for the Filling Station Reading Series. He was the runner-up in Rhino's 2017 Founders Prize Poetry Contest. His work has appeared in Rhino Poetry, Page Boy, as well as the Jet Fuel Review, and soon to come, the Peauxdunque Review. We're very excited to have Willie's poem that we selected for issue 6. When we read it, not only did we like it very much as a poem for its own sake, but it seemed to very much speak to kind of the thematic, aesthetic crosshairs of where we often find ourselves in Peauxdunque. So he's going to read to us from his poem, Hitting a Deer Beside a Soy Field Outside Traverse City, Michigan. And hopefully we'll hear a couple of his other works as well. Willie?
Thank you, Tad. Yeah, I'll be reading that piece. I'm going to start with a few others first from a manuscript I'm working on. But yeah, I just wanted to say thank you to all the readers as well as the staff. I'm really just excited to be a part of this issue. Inheritance. My sister and I are beginning to inherit the lightning blonde crab grasses and balding plains of our father and mother's wealth. They sneak these to us, recipes for deviled ham, ticket stubs from Broadway, a mermaid's compass from my grandmother's house. They began as little gifts, hidden next to the chocolate in our stockings, wedged like mints through mail, stuffed into pockets when we're hugging to say goodbye. But soon, $100 bill stuffed into a children's book, my car's lease paid off, plane flights free with all-inclusive cruises. It felt lonely, spotting their hopeful eyes studying us, then disappearing with the snowbirds to the Florida coast, to the condos tiled pearls weak white, and the pinks forgetful as the crush of receding shores. They're waiting there. They've even made up a spare bed in their studio for me. My father proudly announces my name is in the lease. He explains it'll be so simple. When I arrive at the gate, I can just flash my ID. They'll show me where to go. Playing hide and seek while my dad pays bills. I pause at shelves ornamented with whaling boats and paintings of horse-drawn carts. How foreign this house I was born in, and my father hurrying his pen across each gray bill. With the glee of being chased, I run past wheelchairs and canes and an antique vase as my father dreams of Irish vacations, remembers fishing on the Blackfoot, and dots a tilted I at the far end of his signature. How strange he is at his desk beside a cabinet of glass figurines. Dragon, dolphin, frozen star, his impatience gulped with a sigh as I dash by under the tripod leg of a globe. The man I know for repeating blazing saddle jokes and choking up at Christmas holds an expression I can't possibly understand in a house I barely know. Miniatures. My grandmother built miniatures, chairs as small as salt shakers, Polaroid-sized stoves, flowers painted on a thimble-turned urn. Her easels exhibited watercolors scaled to lottery stubs, worlds amenable to microscopic desires, her cat's nose parting the curtains inside a lampshade shower, a feeding tube hose fastened to actually run a bath. Her dozen bedrooms had blankets, each with turned-down sheets, folds where I can still spot the pleats her fingers pinched. In these rich rooms, apology notes creased into bouquets and army honors ornamented into serving dish. In the corners of her carpetless basement, she worked, shaving my grandfather's peppermints into snow and trimming his glucose strips into jacketless books. She placed them into the ice cube tray cubbies of libraries inside the matzah box floors of a Victorian house, where dolls in pill cap flats take tea, sigh, and wander about. And I'll be reading 2 more poems. The Rowayton Woods. So refreshing these nights which never were, scary stormy skies, bruised bone blue, conjuring the pitchforks of our past over the bedrooms of our kids. These nights which were traceless as our bodies which never scar, like the poker chip pox spread over Jim Campbell's back, rehealed from the weight of his Harley. Or nights which revived us, sparking our lungs to inflate like zucchinis, like those gourds still bloating off of Camille's back porch, lungs full and breathing, by which Mr. Patterson's body still lives, his blood never having spit toward the hospital ceiling when the doctors whittled the tumor from his ribs. Or these nights which were hearty, good luck quarters flipped in the Black Duck's back room, where Rob Weinberg still sits, still married, cracking jokes with Emily from accounts, who won't go home to sob that night about that thing her boss did. No, tonight, through the impossible storm, we ferry a small boat through this tavern's flooding parking lot, following the meridians of guardrails to our homes, where instead of tax forms and receipts, we find our fathers taking shots of aquavit and singing Gordon Lightfoot hits. And in the freedom of every chorus, they never hide the whiskey from grandma, never steal the weed from their kids. No, with honesty and pride, we walk the cobbles of this town, which has never burned its children for fear of witch, or buried the Siwanoys sachems to pretend they don't exist. Across this town's commercial docks, we head out and adore the velvet bent grass at the Bailey Spit, and extol the bulrush roots clutching the ocean's saltiness, stoned off nothing but the Long Island Sound and the storms patterning in late August, and moved by our tiny town and its one copper plaque honoring the Union's blockading ships, that we wake our kids from their Batman dreams and retell them how wonderful their town really is. This is my last poem. You can find this in issue 6 of the Peauxdunque Review. And thank you again, everyone. Hitting a deer by a soy field outside of Traverse City, Michigan. When I look up, the soy reassembles. The soy reassembles under the pine's mossy gray into an unformed clay free of the calculating body of the cop aiming his pistol toward the soy. The soy, which already seems like it forgot the deer who, like you, hurt nobody at all. Strange, when I look up, I think of you, who've hurt nobody at all in a psych ward in Framingham, Massachusetts. Afraid of your body like the deer of the cop, aiming his silver pistol like a boy who just wants all the pain to stop. Thank you again.
Thanks so much, Willie. I don't know if you noticed in our little comment stream over here backstage, but I think something that we all feel with these virtual readings over the last year and a half, the thing I hate the most, I love them because we can bring so many people together from so far apart, but I hate that y'all can't hear the applause between pieces. But I've been applauding between all the pieces. My cats think I'm going a little nuts, but that's all right. Our next reader is Nikki Ummel. She is part of a very select group. I think probably, I don't know, a handful of folks who have appeared in multiple issues, just because when their work comes across, we can't say no to it. Nikki's actually has some poems in issue 5 and in issue 6. So this is a double launch for Nikki's work with us. Nikki is a queer writer in the Creative Writing Workshop at the University of New Orleans. A career educator, Nikki started writing poetry to help cope with the trauma of teaching 5th graders. Nikki has been published or is forthcoming in Painted Bride Quarterly, Hobart, The Adroit, and more. She is the associate poetry editor for Bayou Magazine. And we're just thrilled to have her work. Her work has come to us both ahead of issue 5 and ahead of issue 6, and submissions into the Words and Music Writing Competition both years, where both years her work has risen into that top group of poems. And actually, this last year, her pieces were honorable mention in the poetry category, the creative nonfiction category, and the short story category. She is a writer of many talents. So, Nikki, welcome. I can't hear you. If you take out your headphones, does it change if you unplug them from the? So now, can we hear you? It's just really quiet. Like I can hear you there. Still really quiet. Why don't we do this? I'm going to switch the order and bring up Adam. And in the meantime, let's see if we can work out the audio issues with you, Nikki, because I really want to have your poems as part of this. So, oh wait. So yeah, I'm gonna have Adam come up, and then I think we can fix what's going on with Nikki. So our next reader will be Adam Carlin. He has creative nonfiction in issue 5, which is more work that came to us as submission to the Words and Music Writing competition in 2020. His piece was, Adam, I can't remember off the top of my head if it was runner-up or one of the honorable mentions, but it was one of our favorite pieces that came across really in the whole year. And we were thrilled to see it and thrilled to have it in issue 5. So, Adam, I'm going to let you take it away.
Okay. Can you guys hear me? Well, anyway, we'll just hope you can. No worries. Okay, great. This is a piece on because I earn my pay as a travel guidebook writer. This is a piece on travel and the search for authenticity and where that intersects with ethnicity. So yeah, I'll just launch into it. There are racial overtones linked to a certain brand of authenticity, an idea that only a certain ethnicity can make a certain thing the right way. These notions make me uneasy, and I also, in my own way, totally buy into them. If I hear a bunch of Vietnamese spoken in a pho place, I bet on getting good soup. On the flip side, I approach a white chef at a Mexican food truck with the confidence I reserve for a used car dealer. But in a globalized world, isn't it unrealistic, if not offensive, to cordon off food into ethnic enclaves? Hondurans work sushi counters. Filipinos fire the pans in French restaurants. Russians, Poblanos, and Jamaicans are the backbones of 1,000 resort kitchens, serving everything from 5-star Italian to Hong Kong fusion. I also have to admit that I find myself having issues with quote-unquote ethnic places that seem like they have a modern or minimalist chic. And this is frankly an unfair reaction. I was a journalist. I worked as a journalist in Bangkok. I know Thai food can be served in hip lounges to wealthy customers. I know Bangkok natives can be Bushwick hipsters. But in the USA, I'm suspect to the cliche that ethnic food is first of all brown or black food, even though Italian or Spanish or German cuisine is never considered as such. And I still hew to the cliche that said brown or black food is best consumed in the immigrant penumbra that rings major American cities. The strip malls where English is rarely spoken as a first language, cheap electronics are on sale, and the clientele are people who think Yelp is a noise a dog makes when you step on its tail. I feel this way because my mom was a first-generation Burmese immigrant, and those were the places she took me. We worked hard to be whiter than white America in so many ways. Went to malls, bought big TVs, participated in the PTA. But when it was time to eat, we went off the radar of our native-born countrymen. Little immigrant-run restaurants were our thing, and by our, I mean Mom and I, but also every assimilating family that needed a taste of home. A sort of secret access to the best food was one of the few tokens of cultural capital we possessed, and we guarded it all the more fiercely because in the 1980s, at least, our cuisine was derided by the America we were trying to become a part of. Growing up, kids sometimes wouldn't come to my house because they thought Mom's cooking smelled funny. It smelled delicious to me, but I learned to make a face at it because I was a kid trying to fit in. Now I see the bitter irony of that reaction. The sense from Mom's kitchen embedded the knowledge of good noodle soup into my cells, and at least partly gave me the discernment to become a trusted reviewer to the mainly white audience that now reads my travel guides. I know for a fact that the kids who once bagged on how bad my house smelled now post pictures from neo-Asian food halls on their social media. Honestly, I'm glad their taste and the nation's has evolved on this front, but I'd be lying if I didn't feel a little resentment too. Part of me still wants to hoard the cultural capital of good noodle soup all to myself. This sort of provincialism is ultimately self-defeating, and the reason why can be found in my adopted hometown of New Orleans and the two places I regularly go for Vietnamese food. Bachi Canteen, located near my house, drips with pop culture aesthetic. A lot of the customers are college students who likely either come from money or coming into it or both. This used to be an Italian place until it was bought out by the children of the owners of Tan Dinh, a decidedly old-school Vietnamese spot on the New Orleans West Bank. Tan Dinh is one of my favorite restaurants in a city known for good eats. Sort of spot chefs repair to after shift for caramelized quail and spare ribs served with lime salt. Good as anything you would find on a street corner in Da Nang. Sadly, I don't go there that often because I have, like the children of so many immigrants, moved into a pleasant residential neighborhood, and I don't feel like driving 30 minutes for noodles. Ba Chi and Tan Dinh are separated by a few miles of physical space and a universe of culture and income. The latter is located on a strip of nowhere highway in Jefferson Parish, next to a telephone post studded with InfoWar flyers. Ba Chi occupies a leafy corner of a neighborhood adjacent to Tulane University, where the cars sport Bernie Sanders stickers. The two restaurants have similar menus, but Ba Chi eschews more obscure Vietnamese specialties like goi tap cam, jellyfish and calamari salad, for bacos, fluffy rice cake tacos stuffed with fillings like tamarind shrimp or honey ponzu catfish. Locations are different, so are the clientele. Tan Dinh is always stuffed with families of all colors. The restaurant might be in the camo and F-250 burbs of a conservative state, but it's been around long enough to earn that community's gastronomic trust. At Ba Chi, the crowd is about 20 years younger and 100 times more likely to be from out of state. Yet dish for dish, the food is as good in one spot as the other. Tan Dinh has a larger menu, but the vermicelli bowls at Ba Chi, which can be assembled Chipotle style, are brilliant. Ba Chi's owners have figured out ways to market to younger Americans without diluting the depth of flavor of traditional Vietnamese cuisine. Compare this to Long Grain, a kind of shishi place I went to in Maine, which I initially thought I didn't like because it was an immigrant place aimed at white Americans. Ba Chi is that too. It's just that the food is a hell of a lot better, as quote-unquote real as anything I've had in Hanoi, even if half the customers are named Brittany. In a way, by giving white Americans such authentically good Vietnamese food, by normalizing the flavors of the Mekong Delta for an American palate, I'd argue Ba Chi erodes this nation's inherent whiteness. Hell, if we really want to live in a more diverse, multicultural society, don't we want the Britneys of the world eating good noodle soup? Or what about making it? My buddy David used to push a 1,000-pound homemade tandoor oven around New Orleans, part of a mobile South Asian kitchen he built from scratch. His goal was to serve good, authentic naan, dal, curry, and tandoori chicken and lamb. His inspiration was food cooked by the mother of his Pakistani-American best friend, a woman who had been a second mother to David in the burbs of Northern Virginia. While David was running his business in New Orleans, a rundown of white-owned restaurants, pop-ups, and food trucks that served appropriated cuisine was published in Portland, Oregon. The list compilers argue that white restaurateurs have an easier time finding seat capital than people of color, and white clientele tend to prefer bland versions of immigrant food, so why not go to the real source and spend money at a business owned by people of color? I'd add to this argument that even if people don't care about the racial dynamics at play, shouldn't everyone spend their limited eating out budget on, good food? I live in the South, where people will brag about driving an hour out of their way for a good meal, yet I've seen tons of Southerners pack into the forgettable Asian in Tuscaloosa, Alabama, a terrible Japanese place, quote-unquote, opened by former Alabama quarterback A.J. McCarron. Get the name? I know. The same people who mock Northerners for watered-down barbecue and bland catfish will happily drop stupid amounts of cash on imitation crab and gluey rice served with a dollop of electric green wasabi squirted out of a tube. The difference, of course, is institutional knowledge. A lot of Asian diners probably grew up with good barbecue. So yeah, Asian would deserve a spot on the appropriation list, but I would argue that David, who cooks with love and importantly skill, does not. His food is excellent, and David respects the culinary traditions of Pakistan and the Punjab. All the truth about privilege can't stop the fact the world is globalizing. People fall in love with things outside of the culture they were born into. If that love is true, if it's authentic, I'm not going to shame someone for trying to replicate something beautiful. And I'll finish with, skip a little and finish here. My buddy Thomas leans into being a foodie in a way that I can't. The term alone makes me uneasy. Foodie implies somebody obsessed with eating to the point of distraction, unable to pick a restaurant without exhaustive smartphone research, unable to tuck in without an Instagram photo shoot. I'm guilty of all the above. I'm just neurotic about it. I'd rather get caught watching porn on an airplane than Instagramming my hamburger. But Thomas, he embraces foodie like every other cliche in his life. He is a silver fox gay realtor who makes gobs of money, spends it like water, and does not give a good goddamn if you see him positioning his phone above his sashimi with all the care of a National Geographic photographer. Thomas is unapologetic about his love for social media, and it's in a way that makes him more authentic than the rest of us bemoaning the screens in our lives via status updates on our smartphones. He is also a good friend visiting from Washington, D.C., and when he hits up the usual New Orleans restaurants, the Grace Bon Appetit and James Beard lists, he also wants to eat it somewhere off the beaten path. So I take him out to Gretna, a working-class New Orleans burb located on the West Bank. We're across the street from Ton Din, that old-school Vietnamese place I mentioned earlier. Those InfoWars stickers are on the telephone pole. Inside Big Easy, the floor is red tile and the drinks are served out of fridge. You can get a raspberry Gatorade or a flask of Mad Dog that's pretty much the same color. The radio is playing a string of bounce tracks. The Triggerman beat syncing with a mix of yelled, yat and you heard English exchanged between the kitchen, the guys working the counters, and the customers. To be fair, some of the workers speak Spanish with a Central American accent. Hondurans form the bedrock of the New Orleans Latino community. Some of the speakers are white, some are black, plenty are brown, including the square-jawed Vietnamese guy at the register who speaks with an accent that lands somewhere between Metairie and the Mekong Delta. Takes my order, 2 pounds of crawfish, Cali style, tells me not to pay until after we finish eating. You want more, baby, he says, smiling. What's Cali style? Thomas asks. I can tell he wonders if this meal is going to be as New Orleans as I promised, and I assure him it's at least as Gulf Coast as gets. I've just ordered Viet Cajun crawfish, a dish supposedly first served in Houston that represents a synthesis of Louisiana boil recipes, themselves a blend of African and Acadian foodways and Vietnamese migrant sensibility. We pluck out some beers from the fridge, and watch the bottles sweat for a few minutes before a wooden bowl full of shellfish is placed before us. The crawfish are boiled in a Cajun spice blend any Louisiana resident would recognize, but they're swimming in an impossibly rich, fiery pool of garlic butter that clearly has antecedents in the sauces used on the steamed fish and pan-fried chicken churned out by Vietnamese kitchens like Ton Din. We get to eating, and soon Thomas and I are a righteous mess, our faces smeared with the butter, our groans palpable and indecent. Our tongues probe and lade the shells of the crawfish to soak up the sauce. We do not just suck the brains of the crawfish out of their heads per normal boil etiquette. We crack the cranial exoskeleton and drink the things as empty as a cicada shell in summer. I have no idea why this stuff is called Cali style. Rumor has it a Vietnamese family member out west perfected the recipe, but even then, the literal and figurative ingredients of this dish are of this place. It is authentic to New Orleans, even if it was invented in Houston or California, because this is the kind of place where the stuff arises naturally. You could have great Vietnamese crawfish in Nome, Alaska, if it was made by the right cook with the right skill, and that would be authentic too. But I don't know, it's extra authentic here because the crawfish are from here, and the recipe for that silly, delicious garlic butter sauce is a culinary tributary of the cultural delta of South Louisiana. The way everyone is eating and laughing and washing the spice away with booze and generally enjoying the hell out of life, well, you could replicate that for sure, but it grew naturally out of this mud. When I think back on that meal, I think about how it was made up of so many quintessential Louisiana components, many of which are usually segregated by lines of income, class, and race. When those lines vanished, something special emerged. It may not have been true Cajun or true Creole or true Vietnamese, but it was truly derived from all of those things, and it was authentically delicious. That's its own true, and for me, that's as real as food or anything else needs to be. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Adam. I apologize for fumbling on the handoff to you there. Normally, I would have provided an introduction before you started reading, but that was your wonderful piece, Noodle Soup, which is in issue 5. Just so everybody knows, Adam, as he said, is a travel writer and journalist. He's based out of New Orleans. He's a regular author for Lonely Planet. He's contributed to over 100 guidebooks for them, covering destinations in Asia, Africa, and North America. His journalism and essays have been listed in Best American Travel Writing and have been published by the BBC, NPR, the Christian Science Monitor, Catapult, The Bitter Southerner, and in multiple anthologies. And we're just thrilled that his piece is in Peauxdunque Review. Again, that's Noodle Soup. Look for it in issue 5. We are to now our last reader, Nikki Ummel, who I tried to introduce before. I think we've got our issues figured out there. Nikki has poems in both issues 5 and 6, and we're just thrilled to see her work whenever it comes across. So, Nikki, take it away.
Can you hear me this time?
Yes.
Yay! All right. Hey everyone, I'm Nikki. Welcome to the UNO Computer Lab, where I am currently still stationed. So the first poem I'm going to read for you comes from Peauxdunque Review, issue 5. It's called Aniston Burning. The barreling bus swerves to avoid the dead dog in the road. We nervous laugh. There is nothing funny about a dead dog. The world blur outside is still normal. Pearls of sweat down our backs collect in our hymns. Our hymns collect in our throats, air desperate. There is a strain of grit in teeth, ropes in neck. Being here is choosing. Being here is choosing change. If God is in Alabama, he's too busy swimming in the whites only pool to feel the flames reeling from our ruined bus. For some, eyebrows singed. For some, sinew scorched. For all, a buried coil, lodged deep in bellies and hearts, hot to touch, ready. My generation's out of breath. We ain't running no more. So it's a poem about the Freedom Riders in Anniston, Alabama. Their bus was firebombed by white supremacists. And so the following poem I'm going to read for you, which is also in Peauxdunque Review, issue 5, is titled Woman Power Unlimited, which follows the story of the Freedom Riders. They were arrested in Jackson, Mississippi, and some of them were sent to Parchman, which is a prison, a notorious prison in Mississippi, Mississippi State Penitentiary, which started out as a farm, as so many prisons do, with enslaved people. And they still use enslaved people as forced labor on the farm. It is still an operating farm, even now in 2021. So anyway, this poem is about this group of women who named themselves Woman Power Unlimited in Jackson, Mississippi, who went and fed and comforted the Freedom Riders as they were awaiting their sentencing, as they were imprisoned there in Jackson, Mississippi. The trained dogs couldn't mob us, so incarceration became alternative. Arrest in bulk, shipped to Parchman, watched their cause shrivel. We opened our throats, closed our eyes. Freedom made our voices hoarse and overlords angry. Near naked poked and prodded. Hot breath tickled broad lines and broke no one. Cold floors called iron to our spines. Kindness came in candies, passed between bars by warm, grasping hands. In soft shirts to clothe our bruised bodies. In firm smiles from painted lips found under the hem of Sunday hats. God is here, these Jackson women said, and we believed them. My next poem, which is also in Peauxdunque Review, issue 5, all 3 earned honorable mention, as Tad mentioned. So I'm so grateful that they were published. This one takes a different turn. It's about a young woman coming of age. It's titled 11. She carries the purse like a crucifix she can use to fend off vampires, thirsty for the blood that she imagines will soon run between her legs. She is excited, feels the thrill of secrets, her pads a badge of honor peeking from a small purse her mama bought at the corner store on the way to school. The girl's young mother, rooted in the school parking lot, smothers concern for her young daughter's sudden bloom. Fear cools her veins, so young. She bites her nails and fingers her rosary. Hail Mary, full of grace. Is the fruit of my womb blessed too? The girl palms her hall pass like a sword, points it at questioning teachers. Hawk-eyed Coach Kenyon, wet-mouthed Miss T. The girl carries within her prayers of desperation. She's dying to bleed today, but damn, it still feels good to pretend. I wrote that poem. I used to teach 5th grade. As Tad mentioned, that's when I really started writing poetry. And I had a young woman in my class who would carry around menstrual pads, even though she hadn't actually started her period yet. This next poem is in issue 6 of Peauxdunque Review, coming out soon, or I guess next year. And it is in honor of my grandmother, Millie. The title is The Memory Ward at St. Sebastian. The woman loved her potted flowers like pets, always held tender the orchids with their hidden treasures, bloom invisible and less magnified. She steamed her bathroom mirror and wrote reminders to herself. Fold laundry, reach out to Hal. Remember your grandchildren's names, Ryan, Tessa, Nikki. Read a book. Books weep bitter across the floor of the woman's second floor room, tender with loss. Her belongings fold into corners, fierce scavengers. Even the meat in the fridge, rancid and steaming, cowers, wants more time. It loved her too. Will love her always. Always, when stepping out for meals, the woman left a note, just in case, tenderly folded into a crane, fragments of an origami class. The nurses say she collected phone books to check if her husband still lived on West Epler Street, but he's been dead since 2010. Her room is paid with his pension from the steam mill. Steam seeps into the curtains while I soak the floors tender, let the bleach marinate. I'm booked clean through Thursday, yet I take time to refold the last note, left open on the counter by the nurses. Dearest Hal, my always, and promising him the orchids. This next poem is inspired by the fig tree in my backyard. It is also in Podunk Review, issue 6. The fig tree on Dauphine Street speaks. I can do bad all by myself. A tree gets lonely, and who cares if I decide to caress my way into birth? I am rooted in shattered oyster shell and reach deep inside to tickle myself so I can spit fruit like teeth onto packed dirt. I twist to get a better look. Admire my seeds split from the fall, flesh bursting with sweet wet, soaking my knobby roots like blood on ripe knuckles. Color me pink. I am bad all by myself. I pour forth more, reel from my own fecundity so the babies next door in the double shotgun with green trim can harvest my abundance. I delight in their delights. Full diaper waddle and matching blue bonnets to sit beneath my smooth leaves and pop delicious pink onto rough tongues. Pull loose the skin. All day snacks with open mouth smacks. I bend forward as I have for near 10 years and shake loose my limbs so you, my neighbors, my sweet holy cross, can summer feast, can catch my glory in your white shirts and your Dickies pants, your backwards baseball caps. I revel in the juicy shadows smudged behind. Forget my sister on Royal Street. You know she's not as tasty. Go on. Watch me preen. I've got a couple more for you. So this next one on the train of sexy fruit poems is titled Take Me to Church. I seek you after long days dutifully spent, reciting lessons, sharing plans. My tongue seeks your tongue, the warm pulp of it. Like the papaya we share on Sundays, all tongue, all meat, all sloppy wet, an offering. We start with a reckoning. Teardrop fruit to ear, we note the noise, beg release for the right one to satiate. In the backyard, as the sun slurps sky, you slash the papaya in two, and always the bigger piece belongs to me. You let me be greedy. This, my religion, the corner of your mouth, the yellow flesh you forgot, your full face in fruit bowl, tongue licking the sides green. Juice trickles your soaked chin. I lick you long, stretch a trail from temple to temple, leave a crown of flax and spit. Later, when our smiles are stringy, you'll FaceTime your mom and she'll chide us to better hide the pulp rising from our teeth. As you speak, your tongue pops quizzical from the crease of your lips. Slack tongue hang when you deep think. The pink in me purrs, perks and listens. Your golden smile, an offer of the last lick. I raise my sticky palms and sing your praises. Just got a couple more for you. So this next one is actually the first poem I ever had published. This is Painted Bride Review. It is titled Sarasota 2010. The first time I had sex was in a barn. He laid me down like a blanket, smoothed me over. My edges were tucked. Windows wide, I saw the trees sway, heard the horses moan. The April fields of lavender looked lovely, buds ripe, seed ready to spread. After, he buttoned his pants and told me he loved me. A horse had butted the door. Another scratched at the frames. The lavender lifted. I saw all the trees of the field clap their hands. All right, I got just two more for you. This next one's a golden shovel. That means the word at the end of every line forms a poem that's already been written by someone else. This form was created by, this is so embarrassing, Terrence Hayes. Terrence Hayes created this form after Gwendolyn Brooks. So this poem, the end words all form the poem Tonight I've Watched by Sappho. It's called Ophelia's Curse. I am shelled edamame wet with want. Tonight I will regrow new skin I've been saving, perfectly dewy. The cardinal in the window watched us smash ourselves raw 3 days from breaking up. The clock inside of my chest blinks. I am moon-faced and cold, alone. I search for my keys and reach for my head, find neither. I practice smiling with my teeth and grab my tongue. It is obsolete, obscene. Who needs a fuck? The space, please vacate by the end of Dicktober. Pleiades refused my pleas, descended despite my willow's reach. I must go somewhere, anywhere, must halt the plunger spiral down, down, only down into my garbage stomach and trash can tits. The hole between my legs, bright as silverfish at night, but our bed is too big. Our bed is too you. I'll burn it, yes. Now is the time of big fire. The walls have gone. I greet our newest neighbor in my nightie. I watch my youth nail a vacancy sign to my forehead. Muddy and mindless, she goes next door, singing melodious, and crouches beneath wet couch. I am a squatter in my own house. I am in my own bed. I am in our bed, in ribbons, twisting to hold your spot, in bed, burning alone. And the last poem I'm going to read for you tonight is titled, Where Else Does My Mother Go When She Dream Walks? Last night I dreamt of my mother, her return after all these years. I'm here, she didn't say. I'm here now for good. And I reached out, held my mother's hand the way I did only once in the waking world, when I walked her to the middling ground, where dreams drip ghosts and living slide sideways into hazy nothing. When I woke, stale saliva creased the corners of my mouth, as if hiding from the sticky tears pooling like blood behind my head. My hands clawing bed sheets as if human and whole were irreconcilable at dawn. And I strained to hear her hum from the fireplace, the suit song spilling, begging to take my arm and lead me back to the dream where time ends. My head in her lap, her hands in my hair, and sleep that brings peace. Thank you all so much.
Thank you so much, Nikki. That was, I think, that set of poems really helped us sort of nail the landing tonight. That was, they're all great. I just want to end by thanking everybody who read tonight: Christie, David, Janine, Willie, Adam, again, you, Nikki, and everyone who came to listen to all this. What we're all searching for, I think, as writers, or maybe I'm being presumptuous in saying this on behalf of all writers, is community. And we consider everybody who we put into our books part of our community. And I think tonight, everyone who came to listen to these writers read are part of that community. And I couldn't ask for a better, larger community for all this to be happening in, other than the Words and Music Conference. So thank y'all for having us. And be sure to check out all the great programming all weekend long. We'll be back tomorrow afternoon at 2:30. Hosting a reading by the winners and runners-up of the 2021 Words and Music Writing Competition. So be sure to check that out. And everybody have a great night. And thanks again.
Thank you, Tad. We cannot wait to hear the next round of writing competition winners tomorrow at 2:30. We will be back at 10 o'clock in the morning with a musical performance by Les Sinels to start off Festival Friday. You all have a wonderful day, and we will see you very soon.